very interesting dilemma. We've seen surfing sort of increase in the public interest over the last couple of years in a lot of ways because we've been able to see it. They've been in locations where people can go to watch it, but not necessarily where the big waves are.
Yeah, I mean, initially when surfing sort of got on the map as a premier sporting event in the 1980s, they were purely in cities. And then in the 90s, the thought was, all right, let's go find the best waves. They went to Fiji, they went to Bali, and the increase of the internet enabled them to webcast this, enabled them to have these wonderful photographers go into the water and have these shots that you just couldn't find anywhere else. And that really was the big push to create surfing where it is today. And then in the last really year and a half, because of this push on consumer spending, because some of the main retailers are having other issues like Billabong and Hurley with some of their debt, they said, all right, we need to rethink this because, quite frankly, those type of events don't put the consumers, our consumers right there. It's
physically there to buy their stuff, to buy their glasses and their board shorts and all of that.
That's right. And so what we've seen in the last year and a half is the sponsors said, look, if we're going to sponsor the Australian Open, we need it in Sydney. We're not going to the best waves in Bells Beach in sort of the middle of nowhere, Australia. And so that's what we're seeing is this push to, heck, New York and San Francisco hosted events last year.
I know, it was a huge deal out in Long Beach. I mean, and you saw like all along Long Beach, so them selling the goods, and they must have done quite well, I would imagine.
They did well. I mean, they looked at the U.S. Open of Surfing, which is in Huntington Beach, California, and that makes more than $20 million in revenue for Huntington Beach, let alone what it makes for each of the surf companies. So it's too much money to say no to. And there is this old, exactly who you'd expect, these older surfers, these 15, 16-year-old guys who are used to living in huts and who cares about the money, saying, look, the point of this is to find out who's the best surfer. And as much as we all love Long Island, we're not going to find the best surfer in a surf competition on Long Island.
And what's tricky, though, and I think people don't often realize this, is that surfers, even the best surfers like Kelly Slater, they just don't make that much money when they win. They depend on these endorsements, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Kelly Slater, who's the most decorated surfer in history, has 30 major victories. His total purse, $3 million. When you win the Pipe Masters, which is one of the most prominent events, your paycheck is well less than 100 grand.
Right.
And it's just simply, the sponsorship is how they survive. And while they don't, they can't even, I don't even know how they get to some of these events if the sponsors weren't there, picking up the tab. So, they say, you talk to the surfers and they say, hey, we're going to do whatever best for the sport. But ultimately, when the person signing your paycheck is the one determining this, it's likely that this push to cities is going to continue and be sort of something that becomes a more concrete part of the sport.
Now, you're a surfer.
I am.
So there are some things, though, you can do in these sort of beach competitions where the waves aren't quite as gigantic tricks, right? That can be, equally entertaining to some extent.
Yeah, and we've seen this if you look at the roster of professional surfers. You've seen a big push from surfers, especially in Europe, who like that kind of surfing. It's called aerial surfing. And what they'll do is they'll do 360s on the board, and they'll do different types of jumps, exactly what you'd see in skateboarding or snowboarding, which sort of have a similar, stance on the board, if you will. And so that's what we're seeing is that those aerial competitions, which is what dominates the city events, are seeing some French surfers who are doing really well, and it sort of plays to their strengths because those are the waves that they grew up on.
And it seems like, Jeff, that they're trying to reach sort of a balance in this, that they're going to have some of them on these big beaches, but they're not giving up on the exotic locales altogether. Is that right?
That's exactly right. In fact, this year they just finished the Australian Open. The next two events are in remote locations. They're off to Fiji and they're off to other Pacific islands, and so they understand that those iconic images that you're sort of famously seeing in surfing, whatever it takes, they need to make sure those stay there. And the question is, do those become a 50-50 split? Is it 60-40? Right now it's 60-40 city, and the worry is that it becomes 80-20 in 2 or 3 years.
You have to keep watching that balance.